The censorship is an indication of failure. If your ideas are working, if your ideas are fresh, if you're not just lying all the time, you do not have to censor. You don't have to censor people. You don't have to censor people when you're telling the truth. You have to censor people when they're telling the truth. That's the whole nature. That's the whole nature of tyranny. We played this game on YouTube that we're going to put up. I don't know if we've put it up yet, where they gave me quotes and I had to guess whether it was the media sucking up to Joe Biden or whether it was a made-up quote. Somebody at the Daily Wire made it up. I did pretty well, but it's really worth watching because it is funny, and the quotes were funny. But one of these quotes so struck me that I actually looked it up and I wanted to play it for you, and just as an indication of why there's censorship. This is CNN Vice President David Chalian, who we heard on a Project Veritas video helping to censor the evidence against Hunter Biden when Hunter Biden was being exposed for influence peddling and maybe planning to give a cut of his influence peddling to the big guy, Joe Biden. David Chalian was basically caught on Project Veritas phone call saying, no, we're not going to, we're going to bury that if we can. Here is David Chalian reacting to part of the ceremonies of Joe Biden's inauguration, cut one.
Those lights that are just shooting out from the Lincoln Memorial along the reflecting pool, it's like almost extensions of Joe Biden's arms embracing America. It was a moment where the new president came to town and sort of convened the country in this moment of remembrance, outstretching his arms.
Now that probably sounded better in the original North Korean, but when this is the guy, by the way, who determines the news, the approach to the news on CNN. I mean, he's not just some paper pusher. This is the guy who actually has editorial power, talking about Joe Biden's arms reaching out, our dear leader's arms reaching out to embrace us. When you are going to sell that sort of crap to the people, anybody who is going to point it out, you have got to silence them. When you are lying, you have got to silence people on the other side. And that gives tremendous power, by the way, to people on the other side who are also lying. Because how do we know what to believe? We believe anybody who's telling us the opposite of what this guy is telling us, because this guy is obviously a lying dog-faced pony soldier, right? So that makes QAnon very powerful, because you can understand how people who maybe, aren't that educated or aren't following the news, they hear that and think, yeah, well, that's more what I want to hear than what this guy is saying. When people are lying, you basically have to censor the other side for fear that the truth will get out and you'll be exposed. This big tech censorship is the problem of the day, because we can win at anything as long as we can make our arguments, and they are doing everything. I mean, I heard that Facebook was canceling ads. We're trying to recall Gavin Newsom here because he's a complete incompetent, and they said they're canceling ads for that. YouTube has censored Senate testimony by doctors who had experiences that contradicted some of the guidelines of the CDC. So YouTube took them off the air, Dr. YouTube. And you can get knocked off Twitter for saying Rachel Levine, the transgender guy in Health and Human Services, that he is a man who thinks he's a woman, when he is literally a man who thinks he's a woman. That is literally what he is. But you can get censored for that, because when you're lying, the truth has got to be stopped. When you're lying, the truth has got to be stopped. The failure of the leadership class, it's got to be protected. And now, because the press is part of the leadership class and because journalism is over, the press is calling for censorship. The New York Times, a former newspaper, had an article called "How the Biden Administration Can Help Solve Our Reality Crisis" by Kevin Roose, the tech guy. And he quotes them saying, several experts I spoke with recommended that the Biden administration put together a cross-agency task force to tackle disinformation and domestic extremism, which would be led by something like a reality czar. So the government is going to declare what reality is. This, of course, is the big problem with socialism, by the way. The problem with socialism is it envisions a state which is a neutral actor, but a state is filled with people, and people are corrupt. So the last person you want is the state deciding what the reality is for journalists. This is the New York Times saying the government should have the right to declare what reality is, and so that journalists can be censored. Right? That's what they're saying. Brian Stelter, he loves this too. He wants to just make sure people are taken off their platforms. Cut 13.
Big tech platforms say they are removing lies about vaccines and stamping out Stop the Steal BS and QAnon cult content. Now, do these private companies have too much power? Sure. And many people would say yes, of course they do. But reducing a liar's reach is not the same as censoring freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is different than freedom of reach. And algorithmic reach is part of the problem.
So if they bury your head in the sand, you're allowed to keep shouting as long as nobody can hear you. I mean, the problem with Brian Stelter is like a crisis of stupidity. It's not actually a constitutional crisis. The guy just is not really, he's just a total gaslighter at this point. But there is a problem when the White House is saying basically the same thing. This is Jen Psaki on this, 18.
Does President Biden support the continuing ban of President Trump on their sites?
I think that's a decision made by Twitter. We've certainly spoken to, and he's spoken to, the need for social media platforms to continue to take steps to reduce hate speech. But we don't have more for you on it than that.
See, and this has been decided to be illegal when tech can be seen, when a private company can be seen doing for the government what the government is not constitutionally allowed to do for itself. That can be illegal. There's a case, Bantam Books versus Sullivan. The Supreme Court found a First Amendment violation when a private bookseller stopped selling works that state officials deemed objectionable after they sent him a veiled threat of prosecution. So just what Jen Psaki said, just right there, makes this censorship illegal. They are actually violating our First Amendment rights. A lot of people have been asking me, why isn't anybody fighting back? But some people are. Amy Klobuchar, who is a Democrat, but she is now on the antitrust committee. She says that the antitrust laws should be rewritten to make it easier to break up big tech. This is cut 9.
Things are too big right now, Poppy. That's what a lot of my constituents believe. It's what I believe. And you have a situation where throughout history, new companies, small startups have changed the country, have made our country so strong. And right now, especially in the tech area, you have companies like Google that have 90% control over search engines, and you have to allow a regeneration of our economy. What I'm proposing is make sure these agencies are able to take on trillion-dollar companies like Facebook and Google. They can't do it with Band-Aids and duct tape, and then make changes to the law. We've always done that over time. We can't let sophisticated companies that, yes, are popular, that, yes, employ a lot of people, they will continue to do that, but we must have laws that are as sophisticated as the companies we're dealing with, and that's what this is about. It's about a check and balance.
And Ron DeSantis, the great, probably the best governor now in the country, in Florida, he has proposed measures that will fine companies that deplatform political candidates, and he wants to have a measure that enhances the user's rights to allow individuals and the Florida Attorney General to sue companies over violations of individual protections. This is Ron DeSantis, cut 19.
Hunter Biden's story was true. Okay, we now know it was true. And the typical corporate media outlets, they just chose to ignore it. Obviously, they wanted to beat Trump. They had a view on the election. They didn't want to give it any air. So we rely on social media to go around that, not let corporate legacy media outlets control the discourse and let us speak. So you had the New York Post to run it, and you couldn't get any traction. You couldn't get any reach on it because big tech put their thumb on the scale. You guys would print it every single day if you could, and big tech would allow it to proliferate every single day, 24/7.
So the fight is on in this case. There is a fight going on against big tech, and I think I'm pretty optimistic. But the thing you have to remember is all this stuff, using the time of Congress to foment civil war among the Republicans, impeaching Trump when he's already out of office, making a big show out of the trauma you experienced in January 6th while ignoring the trauma that the rest of America suffered at the hands of your protesters, the protesters and rioters that you supported and you excused. All of this stuff and the censorship and trying to silence the voices against you. All of it is an indication of failure, not success. I know it looks like the Democrats are very powerful right now, but they are empty. They're shooting blanks, basically. They have no new ideas, and the ideas that they have are guaranteed to make things worse. They are guaranteed to make things worse. While minority children are not being educated, talking about equity and Black Lives Matter and all that sort of stuff is not going to do a damn thing for anybody. This is an indication of failure. And every time you see a tyrant, in a way, it's an indication of failure. But that is what's happening right now. And we're seeing this is an elite class that has collapsed utterly. And these are the symptoms of that. I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Andrew Klavan Show. If you did, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you stay up to date on all our future content.